Hey, shalom to the hopeful elect. First and foremost, I'd like to give all honor, praises, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rachakodash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders at Great Millstone who teach the truth and rule well. This is Brother Yatab Yawa'Allah coming back from the GMS SF Bay Area camp. And I got a quick lesson today. All right, Lord's will is edifying. But just like a land back off the lesson that the apostle Ramlab did with the elder Kanak and the captain Shamar. You know, they did a live lesson earlier, going into the Gentiles and asking ChatGPT a question, basically breaking it down. All right. And it's super edifying. Lord's will, I can leave the leave the video link in the description. But I just wanted to do a land back and go into one of those captivities, proving, all right, and showing that, when the scriptures talk about Gentiles or the Greeks, when it pertains to salvation, all right, it's really talking about the Israelites. All right. Let me start with this, though. This is Deuteronomy 28 and 15. Okay. Now, these are the consequences, all right, the Lord gave us if we were to break the law, statutes, and commandments. It says, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy power, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. All right. So if we stop following the law, statutes, and commandments, we would be cursed. All right. Now, what did Jake do? All right. The Israelites, you can read about the story in Judges, or you can read about the story after King Solomon, even King Solomon. All right. What we did as a nation. And basically, what did we do? We stopped following the law, statutes, and commandments. We went into idolatry. All right. And when you go into the different captivities, we accepted those different captivities. All right. The Lord showed us, brought us back. He set up certain judges to bring us back. But the main theme is what? That we always kept going off. All right. Now, one of the curses, when you jump down to the 64th verse, all right, what does it say? It says, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people. All right. Salakia. It says, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even to the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. All right, so the Lord would put us in different captivities. All right, and again, you can read that history when you go into the scriptures. All right, the times of the Assyrian captivity, the Babylonian captivity. All right, the Grecian Empire, Persian Empire. All right, up into the Roman Empire, 70 AD. All right, we were pushed out of our land. And what happened? We were scattered. All right, now what happens when you're scattered as a people? All right, well, the remnant would return, but the majority, okay, would what? They would stay in those captivities, or they would stay in that mindset of idol worship, or, calling themselves a citizen or whatever that different nation or country was. All right, which again, I'm going to get an example in the Grecian captivity. All right. Now, let me jump over here. 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 2. All right. And this is New Testament. 1 Corinthians 12 and 2. It says, you know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. Going back to what? The curse we just read. All right. So again, when we go into these different captivities and we start going into idolatry, we start accepting the customs of the land, the laws of the land, the gods of the land. What does that make us? Well, that makes us Gentiles. We start to become Gentiles. Now, does that take away from our heritage? Does that take away from our bloodline? All right, which would be the nation of Israel? No. Meaning what? The promises still had effect to us as a nation, as a bloodline. But nonetheless, what happened? Well, we became Gentiles. And when you go into this word Gentiles, ethnos, all right, what does it mean? The first definition, multitude, associated, or living together, a company, troop, swarm. And this is the point. This is what it's talking about. A multitude of individuals of the same nature or genius. All right. It says the human family, a tribe, nation, people group. Okay. And what tribe, nation, people group, or what were those individuals of the same nature or genius? They were Israelites. Okay. Now, we were Israelites, but we were called Gentiles. All right. We were Gentiles. We were people, all right, that accepted the different customs, all right, the different gods of the nations we went into, pertaining to Deuteronomy the 28th chapter. It said what we would serve those gods. Let me read it again. All right, it says, "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth even to the other, and there shalt thou serve other gods which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." All right, and again, that happened. All right, we went into these different captivities. We started serving their gods. All right, up until today. Well, what do you have our people believing? All right, all sorts of things. Jesus. All right, you have Islam. Okay, you have Buddhism. You have the what is it? The worship of the Book of the Dead. That Egyptian shit. But you have all these different bugged out doctrines and religions. But why did that happen? Because we were scattered and we were stripped of our heritage. All right. Now let me jump over here. Ephesians 2 and verse 11. It says, "Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, that at the time you were without Hamashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without the Most High in the world." All right. Now, how did this happen? Well, again, we're going to read it. All right. When you read this account, which I'm going to get in Maccabees, this is how we became, this is an example, one example of how we became uncircumcision. All right. Now, what happens when you start to, not follow the laws? What happens when you start to go into idol worship? Well, you get cut off. The scriptures specifically talk about in the laws, like for example, if you didn't honor the Sabbath, what would you do? You'd be cut off. All right. If you broke the laws, you would be cut off. All right. And that's why Yahushua had to come in, because now he brought us back to what? To grace. Okay. Even though we were Gentiles, even though we did go into idolatry, even though we did go into the customs of the heathen, well, now Yahushua died to bring us back. All right. And those of the elect will come back. That's what's called repenting. All right. They'll look for the old past, the old ways of our forefathers, which are the righteous ways. All right. Which is our true heritage. Okay. It says, "But now in Hamashiach Yahushua, you who were afar off are made nigh by the blood of Hamashiach." So because we were cut off, because we broke the covenant, because we were called uncircumcision, well, now Yahushua coming into the scene, being that sacrifice, now we're able to come back. All right, now, just because we were Gentiles doesn't mean, or just because we became that into that Gentile mind state, doesn't mean the promises didn't have no effect. The promises were still for the Israelites. All right, but now what? It's through faith. If you believe in that. Now, if you repent, if you come back to Yahweh Shem Yahushua, even if you were a Gentile, all right, you come back to serve the Lord and do the will of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. And this is what the whole New Testament was about. All right, when you go into the stories of the Gentiles who started to believe, the Gentiles who were commanded to not eat the blood, and the certain laws, just to basically ease them back in. All right, well, why would they come back? Because that's what they were originally part of. Okay, now let me jump here real quick. All right, Colossians 3 and 11, because this is what the Christians like to use, but they butcher it. It says verse 10, it says, "And have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him." It says, actually, you know what? Let me start up. Let me start verse 5. It says, "Mortify therefore ye members," Colossians 3 and 5. "Mortify therefore ye members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanliness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, if I'm saying that right, and covetousness, which is idolatry." And how did we learn all these things? Because we became Gentiles. All right, even up until today, we were into all these different things, being American. All right. We were eating pork. We were eating shrimp. We were praying to Jesus or Muhammad or Allah. All right. Buddha. All right. Jesus Cristo. That's all idolatry. into adultery, into murder. All right, the things that we grow up as an American, Jake is into. All right, now it says what? Now coming into the knowledge, we're supposed to mortify that. All right, put on that new man. It says, for which things sake the wrath of the Most High cometh on the children of disobedience. All right, this is why the curses came on effect. It says, in the which you also walked sometime when you lived in them. Yeah, we used to live like this. But now ye also put off all these things, anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. Lie not to one another, seeing that ye have put off the old man with his deeds. All right, part of that old man was being in that Gentile mind state. It says, and have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. So coming back to the true knowledge, the true heritage of who we are, all right, why we're in the predicaments we're in, who's in control, all right, who's running this world. Well, we come back to Yahweh Shem Yahushua and we put on that new man. All right, and this is the point, verse 11, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, but Hamashiach is all and in all. All right, now why? Again, the Christians like to get hung up on this word Greek, and even if you go into these other nations, well, who are these? Who are these talking about? Why does it say there's neither circumcision nor uncircumcision? What happened? Where's that history at? Well, it's all throughout the scriptures, and we're going to get a prime example in the Apocrypha, which is a part of the scriptures. Greek. So when you go into this word Greek, all right, it's G1672. And it says a Greek either by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or the Greek islands or colonies. In a wider sense, the name embraces all nations, not Jews that made the language, customs, and learning of the Greeks their own. The primary reference is to a difference of religion and worship, which this statement right here is partly true. But when they add not the Jews, this is a mistake. All right, this is something that is brought upon by modern Christianity, which is wrong. And that's why, Apostle Thor always goes into it. Sometimes the blue letter goes off. But we're going to prove it wrong. Okay? Because where do we find this history? You go to the Strong's definitions. It says a Hellen, Grecian, or inhabitant of Hellas, by extension, a Greek-speaking person, especially a non-Jew Gentile Greek. Which, again, we're going to disprove that. This is specifically, in this sense, when it talks about there's neither Greek nor Jew, it's talking about Israelites who accepted the customs of the Greek. All right. Now, before I get it in the book of Maccabees, I asked this question to ChatGPT. And it says, could Israelites be considered Hellenized during the Greek kingdom? And this is what ChatGPT said. It says, yes, some Israelites could definitely be considered Hellenized. Which again, we read in here. What did it say for Greek? It said, all nations, not the Jews. But what does it say here? It says, yes, some Israelites could definitely be considered Hellenized during the period of Greek Hellenistic rule, especially during the Seleucid Empire in the 2nd century BCE. Here's the breakdown. After Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire, which included Judea, his empire was divided among his generals. Judea fell under the control of Ptolemies, Egypt-based initially, Seleucids, Syria-based later, especially during the time of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And remember that name. What does Hellenized mean? To be Hellenized meant adopting aspects of Greek culture. And again, we read it in here, G1672, Hellen, such as Greek language, Greek education, gymnasium philosophy, Greek religion and gods, Greek names, participation in Greek-style athletics and public life. This is what it means to be Hellenized. Now, again, we were part of that Grecian Empire. All right? And we're going to read the example of what happened. Israelites and Hellenization. During this time, some Jewish elites embraced Hellenism for political and social advancement. For example, high priests like Jason and Menelaus adopted Greek names and supported Greek customs. A gymnasium was built in Jerusalem. Where do you find this history? Where's Jason and Menelaus? This is in the Apocrypha, in the book of Maccabees. It says Greek language began to spread and Jewish texts like the Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, were written. Some Jews abandoned traditional practices such as circumcision to assimilate. So what do you call? When you're no longer circumcised, what are you called? Uncircumcised. All right? But does that make you not an Israelite? No. It says, but there was resistance. Many Jews strongly opposed Hellenization, seeing it as a betrayal of their covenant and laws. This led to the Maccabean revolt 167 to 160 BCE, when traditionalist Jews, the Hasmoneans, fought against the Seleucid rulers and Hellenized Jews. The book of Maccabees 1 and 2 provide a detailed account of this conflict. So, and this is the conclusion. So were Israelites Hellenized? Yes, to a significant extent, especially among the urban elites and priestly class. But not all Israelites were Hellenized. There was a deep cultural and religious divide. The Hellenization of Jews created long-term tension that shaped later Jewish sects, Pharisees, Sadducees, etc. All right, so again, which goes into what? The history which we read about in the New Testament. So you have to understand what happened in the book of Maccabees in our history to know what was going on in the time of Yahushua. All right, what was being talked about? The Greeks, the Gentiles, what is that? And this is what's called getting proper context. All right, the elder Yashuamba always goes into this. All right, you can't just go from Malachi, the book of Malachi, to Matthew, because you skip over a lot of history, and specifically go into that beast of the Grecian Empire. All right, which was prophesied in Daniel. When you forego that history, you're missing a part of the puzzle piece, a part of the piece that makes you understand the context of what is being talked about when it pertains to salvation of the Gentiles or the Greeks in the New Testament. All right, and again, we're going to read the account because those Greeks, those Gentiles, prime example of when our people started to accept those customs and called themselves of that nation. All right, now I'm going to start at verse 10. Yep. Let me start at verse 10. First Maccabees 1 and 10. It says, and there came out of them a wicked root. When you read up, it goes through Alexander, all right, giving his kingdom to the 4 generals. All right, and it says, out of there came them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, which was the same Antiochus Epiphanes, the 4th you read right here, which ChatGPT was talking about. It says, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein, that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen. All right, which again is what? Part of that Hellenization. All right. Whereupon, and part of the curses. It says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised. All right. So this is what it's talking about, that circumcision versus uncircumcised. This is what Jake actually did. All right. It says, and they made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. All right. So again, you're reading a prime example of how we became uncircumcised. All right. So what happened? You had, the Maccabean revolt. But again, when you further go into the New Testament, this was what caused that deep cultural and religious divide. So when you had Yahushua come on the scene and the apostles, and they were preaching that salvation and basically the covenant still pertaining to those who call themselves uncircumcised, if they repented, all right, then what? They could come back. All right, that's the whole sacrifice of Yahushua. So everybody could come back. And now, even to this time, you had everybody who became Gentiles. We all became Gentiles. All right, but in the New Testament, it's that divide. It's that getting the context of understanding what's going on in this history to know the whole picture. Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, and this is just one example. You had the Babylonian captivity. You had the Syrian captivity. All right, well, the whole northern kingdom, they came over here to the Americas, and what happened? They ended up going off, so they became Gentiles. All right, Persian captivity, Greek captivity, Roman captivity. All right, they pushed out in 70 A.D. You had we went into the interiors of Africa. We called ourselves African. All right, and then all the way to nowadays, the transatlantic slave trade. We came over here. We call ourselves American. All right, this is that part of that curse we read in Deuteronomy the 28th chapter. But nonetheless, now what? The Lord said there is no neither Jew nor Greek. All right? Where there's, verse 11 again, but there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, but Hamashiach is all and in all. All right, so if you believe in Yahweh Shemi Shai, you come back, all right, you repent, okay, you start doing the will of the Lord, no matter what you were calling yourself, but now you believe, Romans the 8th chapter, well, you have a shot at salvation. All right, and ultimately, scriptures say all Israel will be saved, but at this time, the ones who are going to be part of those first fruits are the elect. All right? But, again, Lord's will, this is edifying. Like I said, just a quick example. It's a chat GBT question, land back off the lesson earlier to show, all right, the Greeks or the Gentiles as it pertains to salvation is really talking about Israel. All right? And you have to understand that context to know and get the whole picture. All right? But once again, I want to give all honor, praises, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders at Great Millstone. Shalom to the elect and above all.